Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2016 Mazda MX-5 Miata, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster Diode wiring kit. But before we do that, why don't we check it out and make sure it's going to work for you. So before we get too carried away, I figured it'd be useful just to kind of touch base and refresh yourselves on the main parts that we're going to need to flat tow our Mazda down the road in the first place. Now usually what we do is actually be hooked up to the motorhome and paint a real good picture, but today we have some really bad weather, and so we're just kind of trying to make do, so bear with us here. With that said, there's going to be a total of 5 main parts. First one is going to be your base plate, and the purpose of this is to provide us with a solid and reliable connection point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. Tow bar is going to be the second component, and what this is going to do is be the physical link that actually connects the front of our Mazda to the back of the motorhome. Third main component will be safety cables, and these are just there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. They're going to keep everything paired together. Fourth main component will be the tow bar wiring, and what that's going to do is transfer the lighting functions from the back of our RV to the back of our Mazda, keeping us safe and legal. And last but not least, the fifth main component is going to be the supplemental braking system. And what this is going to do is apply the brakes in your Miata whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome, helping to bring you to a more complete and predictable stop. So just want to kind of show how the wiring works here. So we have a test box, and again, this is going to simulate our motorhome. So the way it works, whenever the motorhome's lighting signals are sent back here, whether it be your taillights, brake lights, turn signals, whatever the case may be, it's going to transfer through the wire and to the back of our vehicle. So let's go back there and check it out. Back here, like I said, we had our turn signal going from the motorhome, and it's being transferred back here. So when it comes to wiring, you know, this kit is probably the best option for the Miata, and not even just for the Miata, for almost all the vehicles out on the road, honestly. This is what I recommend the majority of the time. So we've had a lot of good luck with them. They're really reliable, and they just work when it comes down to it. So once you have it installed, you're not even going to be able to see anything there. You know, it looks factory, with the exception of the connector plug up front. But that's more or less inevitable. And I say that compared to some of the other wiring kits like magnetic lights, for example. With those, you know, they're going to stick to your car. You have to run the wires up and over to the back of your motorhome. And it's kind of just a pain. You know, you have to set that up every time. Then you're worried about stuff scratching up your paint back here. And then eventually you're going to have to store them too, right? So you got a big bundle of wires and some lights. And as we know, storage is precious whenever you're over the road. So having the diode kit that's going to stay with the vehicle, look factory, and be super easy to use, it's definitely a no-brainer, at least to me. So I talked about that connector, and so you take your cable, plug it in, the connector up front, the other end would go to your motorhome, and that's how the signals are going to be transferred back through there. Kind of speaking of the cables though, there's quite a few different options, several different kits that essentially the only difference with them is what type of cable they're going to have, and what one you're going to need is really dependent on what type of tow bar you have. So here today we have the etrailer.com SD tow bar, and this one has kind of this hanger deal where you can wrap your wiring around it, keep it up off the ground. And there's a lot of other tow bars that don't have this at all, or no channels or anything like that in it. And if you have a setup like that, you're going to want the wiring kit that has that's completely coiled like this. So this is a 7-way on one side, 6-way around on the other. Super common kit. This is what the majority of people use and go with. It works really good. For those of you that want something a little different, this is a 7-way on one end, 4-way round on the other. But honestly, if it were me, I'd rather just have the 6-way. That way, eventually, if I wanted to do a charge line or add something else back here, I would have the option to, right? But this is still available. And then, for those of you that have tow bars that have the channels in the side of it, you're going to want a straight or hybrid type cable. That way, you can actually utilize the channels properly. So, a couple more options. This one's completely straight, 7-way one end, 6-way around on the other, so you'd run it through those channels and utilize them. The other one is what's called the hybrid, so it's a 7 to 6, and you can see part of it straight, the other end is coiled. This would be good if you have like a really long tow bar. It's a pretty long cable, and it gives you a little bit of extra length, but either way, as long as you got channels in the tow bar, this one will work as well. And then probably the least common that we see is the 4-way flat to 4-way flat. If this is one you have to use, it's available, and it don't really matter what type of tow bar you have there, because you know, you kind of get what you get, right? And then there's one other kit that's available, and it kind of comes with the bare bones, at least how I like to mention it. It's really just the bundle wiring and the diodes and some of the connectors and stuff. And you would use that kit if your tow bar comes with a cable and comes with the connector plug. Some of the Premier type ones do. And so, you know, if your tow bar has that stuff, you don't need to go back and buy a doubles by any means, you know. So if your tow bar has all those, that bare bones kit is the one that you're going to need. But other than that, at the end of the day, if you need a tow bar wiring kit, really nice setup, you really can't go wrong with them. As far as the installation goes, honestly, it wasn't too bad. You know, being such a small car, there's not a lot of wire to run and things like that. You are going to be working in the trunk for a little bit of the time, so kind of be prepared to kind of try to squeeze in there. But as long as you take your time, really shouldn't give you too many issues. Speaking of that though, why don't we go ahead and wire everything up together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Mazda, and clearly we have the front fascia removed, and that's because we're doing the wiring at the same time that we did our base plate, which is what I suggest doing. You just have a lot more room to work and everything else. But with that said, this probably can be done with the fascia on, just going to be a little bit tighter. But with that said, first thing you're going to want to do is take one end of the bundle of wire and just run it over here where we have our mounting bracket. You're going to take the dust cover, slide that on, and then we can separate these wires. So carefully cut in between them, and then peel them apart a couple inches back. And what I like to do is kind of cut a little bit of the end off and give us a fresh wire to work with. And then we're just going to strip back the insulation a little ways on each wire to expose the copper wire underneath, and then you're going to want to give them a twist to make sure the strands are nice and tight. Once those are all twisted, we can then grab our connector plug here, and on the back of it we're going to have the terminals, and they're going to be labeled. And the way these are going to work is you're just going to back this set screw out little ways. Try not to get it completely removed because they're kind of a pain to get back in. But we're going to have 4. So this one will be labeled TM for taillight, so the brown wire will go there. This one's labeled GD for ground, so the white wire will go into it. This one is labeled LT for left turn, so the yellow wire will get connected there. And this one here is labeled RT for right turn, so the green wire will go into it. So we'll take our strip back wires here and make sure we have the appropriate one. You will then place it into the correct terminal and simply just tighten down our set screw. I'm just going to repeat that same process for our 3 remaining wires. So with all the wires connected, here's what it's going to look like. And from here you can take your dust cover, put that over, and we're just going to secure it to the bracket there on our base plate. And one thing you can do is coat the terminals inside there with some sealer or some electric grease just to help prevent corrosion. I like to wait until the very end once everything is kind of hooked up and ready to go. That way if you do have to kind of get back in here, it's not a big mess. So we'll get this lined up and we'll zip it down just to kind of keep it in place. And then we can start to run our wire towards the back of the vehicle. So in our case, it just comes around here and runs along through there, and it will kind of come through right there. And I just ran it up kind of behind our headlight into the engine compartment. So in the engine compartment, here's where our wire comes up. This runs along through here. And then at this point, it kind of starts to go towards the center. And then I simply just dropped it straight down along the firewall to the underside of our vehicle. And when you're doing this, you know, especially in this area, make sure to do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts. So underneath the car now, this is where our wire drops down. And there's some factory lines here that I essentially just followed. You want to make sure to use some zip ties every now and again just to keep everything secure. But that wire runs right through here. And you can kind of see it on top of this line. This continues to go back. And right here in this area, I just took this, there's a small panel here with I think 4 10mm head bolts. I removed that just to make it easier to see what's going on. But it runs up and is going to just continue straight back over our rear subframe. And that wire is going to come down right there. And right here you can run it that way, so towards the outside of our vehicle. It'll come right here. And at this point, we're just going to let our wire kind of hang for now. What we're going to do is go up top and see what we got going on in the trunk area. That way we can figure out, you know, where we need to get or where we can run our wire up inside. So in the trunk here, what we're going to do is remove kind of all these panels in here, essentially, just so we can see what's going on and get everything routed up in here. So looks like, from what I can tell, all these are going to be held in place with push pin type fasteners. So we're just going to kind of work through and get them all removed. So to get those out, you can take a flathead screwdriver or even a trim panel tool, and you're just going to get underneath the head of it. Once you pop the head up, you can remove the fastener. So I'll just work our way all the way around and get them removed. And once we have them all out, we can start to kind of take our pieces and get them out of the way. So this plastic piece here, that's going to have 4 fasteners, which I removed. And then, I managed to get this here. There's going to be a little light that we'll have to disconnect to actually remove the panel. So there's a connector. You'll just push down on the middle of it, and while you're pushing down, you can pull it out. So just continue to work our way around and get this stuff out of the way. So with all the panels out of the way, over here on the driver's side, we're going to have a grommet, factory grommet right there. And that's what we're going to use to get our wires up into place. So what you want to do is kind of pull this out, and then we're going to make a small hole in the grommet. That way we can pass the wires up through there. When you're doing this, be really careful. Obviously, you don't want to cut those factory wires that are already through. But I'm just going to go off to the side and take a pair of snips and create a small opening. Once we have that opening made, we can put the grommet back in. Then I'm going to reach underneath the vehicle and run our wires up into place. So, pulled the wire up through the grommet and just zip tied it tight so it doesn't want to drop back down. And then what you can do is, like we did at the front, we're going to separate just the white wire from the rest of our wires for now. So I'm going to pull that back to about there, and we're going to have to cut this and ground it. So it turns out there's actually a really good factory ground that we could use right there. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball the length here. And cut it. Then we're going to strip it back. That wire twist. Then we can place on a ring terminal. Crimp it down. And that bolt we're going to pull out with a 10mm socket. Take the bolt, slide the ring terminal onto it. And then we can just tighten it back down. Now what we can do is disconnect our taillight wiring, which is this wire here. It plugs into that connector. You can separate it by pushing down on that small tab and removing the two. And then what I'm going to do is peel off this tape and remove this sheathing that goes around our wires. That way we can expose the wires and actually be able to work with them. So I got all that tape and stuff off our wires here, and this is what they look like. And I also went ahead and just checked them for the functions. And what we're looking for is the taillight signal as well as the brake light signal. And so in our case, the brown wire here, that's going to be our brake light, our stop wire. The red one is going to be for our taillights, and so that's where our diodes are going to get spliced into. So what I'm going to do is go probably about halfway up the wire here and cut them in half. And then I'm going to strip back the insulation on all the ends. And with these wires being a little thinner, it's not a bad idea to strip them back a little bit further. Give them a good twist and then kind of double it back on itself to make it a little thicker, and it'll fit better into the connector. And on all four ends, I'm going to do this. I'm going to strip them back, fold them over, and then take one of the blue terminals that come in the kit, place it over the bare end of the wire, and then crimp it down. So I got all four of the connector ends put on the wires, and now we can start to get our diodes going. So with our diodes, there's going to be some sticky tape on the back side of them. And peel it off. I feel like this will probably be easier to do now. And I'm just going to stick them together like that. And then the side that has the single terminal on it, it's labeled out. You're going to plug that into the side closest to our taillight bulb. So right here, so you just kind of slide on. The other side, you'll just go color for color. So, you know, your brown wire is going into that diode. Take the other end of the brown wire, put it on either one of the terminals, don't matter. Same thing for the red. And now we can take our wiring that we ran up here and start to get that connected. So I cut it to length, and the yellow wire I stripped back and crimped on a blue terminal there. For the brown wire, we're going to do something a little different. So with that one, we're going to take an additional piece of wire. So I actually just used the leftover wire. When I cut this to length, you know, we had probably 6 or 7 foot of wire left over. So I took off the brown one just to keep it matching. And you're going to twist those bare ends together and you want to make sure they're tight. So really kind of put some force onto it. Once those are connected, you're going to take the yellow terminal that comes in the kit, place it over, and crimp it down. Now we're ready to hook up here. So the brown wire, that's going to be our taillight signal. So that's going to go to the diode that has the factory red wire. That's going to slide on. Since the factory brown wire is our brake light signal, we're going to take the new yellow wire and get that one on. Then once they're hooked up, you can simply just take our connector and plug it back in. So with our driver's side hooked up, now we can run our green wire over to the passenger side, as well as that additional brown wire that we tapped in there to the passenger side too. So I just kind of followed this wire up along, running along the back of our vehicle over to the passenger side. So over on the passenger side, this is how I have our diodes hooked up. It's essentially the same exact thing as a driver's side. Factory wire colors are going to be identical, so the factory brown wire will be our brake light, factory red wire will be the tail light, and so on our new green wire, with that being for our stop, I plug that into the diode with the factory brown, and with the new brown wire being our taillight signal, I simply just plug that into the diodes that have the factory red wire. So before we put our panels back together and kind of clean everything up, it's a good idea to test our wiring and make sure it's working properly. So I'm just plugged in to our round 6-way connector here at the front, plugged into a test box. You can plug into your motorhome to do this as well, but keep in mind if your motorhome has any issues, you know, that can be translated back to this. But with that said, we'll try our taillight signal, our left turn, our right turn, and our brake lights. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster Diode wiring kit on our 2016 Mazda MX-5 Miata.